Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, dear devotees, please accept my humble obeisances and welcome to His Holiness Candramauli Swami Maharaj's daily class. Thank you all for coming. We are continuing our reading of Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 12. We are on verse number 3. Welcome, Maharaj. Please accept our humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Haridam Srotamicchamohu Garitam Yariman Yase Bruhinam Stradananam Yasya Jnanam Madachchukaha. Translation: we all respectfully want to hear about him, Maharaj Parikshit, to whom Sukadeva Goswami imparted transcendental knowledge. Please speak on this matter. Srila Prabhupada's purport. Sukadeva Goswami imparted transcendental knowledge to Maharaj Parikshit during the remaining 7 days of his life. Maharaj Parikshit heard him properly, just like an ardent student. The respect of such bona fide hearing and chanting of Srimad Bhagavatam was equally shared by both the hearer and the chanter. Both of them were benefited. Of the 9 different transcendental means of devotional service to the Lord prescribed in the Bhagavatam, either all of them, or some of them, or even one of them, equally beneficial if properly discharged. Maharaj Parikshit and Sukadeva Goswami were serious performers of the first 2 important items, namely the process of chanting and the process of hearing. And therefore, both of them were successful in their laudable attempt. Transcendental realization is attained by such serious hearing and chanting and not otherwise. There is a type of spiritual master and disciple much advertised in this age of Kali. It is said that the master injects spiritual force into the disciple by an electronic current generated by the master, and then the disciple begins to feel the shock. He becomes unconscious, and the master weeps for his exhausting his store of so-called spiritual assets. Such bogus advertisement is going on in this age, and the poor common man is becoming the victim of such advertisement. We do not find such folk tales in the dealings of Sukadeva Goswami and his great disciple Maharaj Parikshit. The sage recited Srimad Bhagavatam in devotion, and the great king heard him properly. The king did not feel any shock of electrical current from the master, nor did he become unconscious while receiving knowledge from the master. One should not, therefore, become a victim of these unauthorized advertisements made by some bogus representative of Vedic knowledge. The sages of Naimisharanya were very respectful in hearing about Maharaj Parikshit because of his receiving knowledge from Sukadeva Goswami by means of ardent hearing. Ardent hearing from the bona fide master is the only way to receive transcendental knowledge. And there's no need for medical performances or mystical, occult, or miraculous effects. The process is simple, but only the sincere party can achieve the desired result. Om Gyan Timirandasya Gina Jana Salakaya Chaksu Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Vimakti Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prachadine Nirvita Sunyavadi Pasyatya Re Satarine Panchakopa Turubhischa Kripa Sindhu Brevacha Patitanam Pravanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namaho Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. By hearing, you learn. Out of all of the senses, the ear is the most prominent and directly connected with both the mind and the heart. The seeing process, feeling, touching, smelling are subordinate to knowledge, even according to their prescribed way. Hearing is direct and and when one hears with proper attention, or well, you might even say full attention, one can get realization of the knowledge that is being spoken. So out of the 9 processes of bhakti, although it's mentioned here, each one of the processes is fully competent to give one self-realization. The acharyas have understood things in terms of application. And an application means that before you can chant, you have to hear. Before you can remember, you have to hear. Before you can serve, you have to hear. And all of the other 8 processes depends on the process of hearing. So hearing is direct, and transcendental sound vibration awakens transcendental knowledge within the heart of one who hears. And there's a certain quality of hearing that is needed. There are different types of hearing, and there are people who appear to be hearing but are not hearing because their minds are focused on something else while the sound vibration is in effect. And therefore, they do not hear perfectly, nor do they hear the essence of the message. They simply hear the words. That type of hearing is not recommended, and it's completely rejected by the authorities, because that type of hearing simply will give one a little bit of sukriti benefit, but it will not awaken transcendental knowledge. And therefore, one has to hear, as Prabhupada mentions in one verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam in the 1st canto, 3rd chapter, text number 44, I believe, the last verse in that chapter, one has to hear with rapt attention. If Sukadeva Goswami was speaking, Maharaj Parikshit was absorbed in the hearing process. He wasn't using his cell phone to see what messages were coming in while he was hearing from Sukadeva Goswami. He was absorbed in the hearing process. And because of that, at the end of hearing for 7 full days with rapt attention, became fully self-realized. The quality of that self-realization, he became fully fearless. Although he was about to die and being bitten by a very powerful poisonous bird, he had no fear because he was completely above the bodily conception of life. We might say, well, that is Maharaj Parikshit. But that same benefit for hearing is available to all living entities if they learn how the process works. As Prabhupada says, it's quite simple. But therefore, one has to hear from the right source. Prabhupada makes the point here that there are other ways that people want to transmit transcendental knowledge, or so-called transcendental knowledge. And he describes one fallacious incident by which some electric current is discharged from master to servant, and the servant gets some energy from that, and he becomes fully realized. The master goes down, the servant becomes better than so this is a live example. This is not something Prabhupada has created. This is actually a story that happened when people follow such bogus masters. But the real process is to hear with rapt attention, as Sukadeva Goswami was speaking. So when we read Bhagavatam, or we hear Bhagavatam for those who are authorized, we also are hearing ultimately from Sukadeva Goswami. because Bhagavatam is the words of Sri Sukadeva Goswami. And therefore, those who repeat those words properly, with attention, are representatives of Sukadeva Goswami. Although they may present that knowledge according to their own level of realization. As long as they don't change the essence of the meaning, they are authorized speakers of the transcendental knowledge, and in particular, in this case, Srimad Bhagavatam. And therefore, one should practice this hearing process. As Prabhupada explains, that one has to hear with rapt attention. What does that mean, rapt attention? It's just some words. What it means that one has to fully absorb oneself in the sound of the knowledge being, and one should be thinking at the same time as the knowledge is coming. Not just hearing, but thinking. In other words, the mind has to be in an active position, actively hearing and actively receiving simultaneously. And that comes by practicing the process of hearing. In the Padma Purana, it's explained that there are 4 principles that make up the process of receiving transcendental knowledge through the process of Shravanam, or hearing. What are those 4 steps? One has to have faith in the speaker. In other words, one has to know that the speaker is bona fide and accept the speaker in that way. 2, one should not try to block that transcendental sound vibration by one's own mental interpretation. In other words, one should try to assimilate the knowledge through the process of hearing. 3, one has to destroy the faults of the mind. That means that when the mind wanders away from the sound vibration, one has to be aware that the mind has gone away and bring it back to the sound. And therefore, one should be very active in the process of hearing and diligent in keeping one's attention on the sound vibration. Because in this age of Kali, we live in such a way as that there are so much sound vibrations everywhere. And the mind has a tendency, in order to protect itself from the sound vibrations that are unpleasant or not needed, the mind has a tendency to block it out. But that is good, that is natural, that's a protective feature of the mind, blocking out sounds that one cannot, benefit from, just like the noise that goes on in the material world. Traffic and various other types of sound vibrations that are just, daily, what we call village talk. And so the mind will protect oneself by shutting down that communication. But therefore, when one comes to the principle of hearing in the proper way from the proper source, one has to practice to alert the mind in such a way that the hearing process again becomes generated to its full capacity, which means that it's an effort. It's an effort to hear. And it's not something that we just lackadaisically or routinely do. Just like many times you see people when they have conversations, people are speaking, but they're not even listening to each other. Or they're waiting for the other person to finish so they can speak what they have in mind to speak. That means you don't learn really anything. Neither you learn about the person nor about the subject matter. It's more like about you want to say something, and so you are very active in thinking about what to say and responding in the same way. But in transcendental circles, where transcendental knowledge is being imparted, there is a what is called destroying the faults of the mind, and that is bringing the mind constantly back to the sound vibration with a desire to understand. And with that desire to understand and hearing properly, then the next principle is that one gets 2 results from that receptivity. or one of two results. One of them is one gets questions. Based on what one hears, needs further clarification from the subject matter that's being spoken, and so one asks questions. Or if one doesn't have questions, one should at least have an understanding that what one heard, they understand it to be correct. It's true. I realized it. I understand it. So in that case, there may not be any questions. So these two are the results of proper hearing. And then Prabhupada goes on to explain that one cannot hear with rapt attention unless one is pure in mind. So this is an interesting statement. That means one has to be following the process of bhakti properly. If one is not following the process of bhakti as given, there is a lack of purity. Purity is not something necessarily of the soul's pure existence. It means the mind's pure receptivity in the process of activity. In other words, one has to follow the process, and that is a qualification of a pure soul. One is following properly. That's called purity in action. So unless the mind is following that, one cannot be pure in mind. And it says one who is not pure in mind, obviously one will not be pure in action. And if one is not pure in action, then one has to be pure. What is that pure in action? That is pure in eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. So this is the result. One has to regulate these bodily necessities, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, accordingly to one's position, and practice that process with the bare minimums in these areas, which are required. We're required to eat. We have to take rest. For those who have family members, there are also rules and regulations for procreation of children according to Shastra. And defending, devotees don't worry about defense too much because they know Krishna is there to protect them. So they make a little arrangement so they can live in this world without too many disturbances. So these are the qualities that are necessary for proper hearing. And then Srila Prabhupada, after delineating all of these requirements, he ends by saying, and anyway, just try to hear. Just try to hear. And so it's an art. Hearing is an art. It's not just because I have two ears, I'm hearing. Sometimes we say, in one ear, out the other. The result of proper hearing is that one will speak also accordingly. And that will be the result of proper hearing, is that one's vakya, or words, are resonant with the sound vibration they hear. And they're also getting understanding and realization of that knowledge. So we have to practice that here. And so this verse is really, really focused on that in the process of hearing. And of course, out of the 9 processes, we mentioned the foundation for the execution, the successful execution of all the other processes is hearing. But one has to include the chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra along with the hearing process, because that is the Yuga Dharma in this age. So even though one may decide to hear regularly and nicely, then one still has to chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. One cannot just sit there and hear someone chanting the mantra or hear a recording. One has to chant also. So Shravanam leads to Kirtanam. Kirtanam leads to Smarnam. Smarnam is Krishna consciousness. To remember Krishna, to remember our position in this material world, to remember to engage in devotional service according to the directions of our spiritual master. So it's as Prabhupada ends the purport here, he says, the process is simple, but only the sincere party can achieve the desired result. So that sincerity is required if we want to become Krishna conscious. we have to be sincere in the execution of devotional service. We should not allow the things that we have to do in this world to interfere with our development of our spiritual life. We should arrange our life in such a way that we have adequate time to hear and chant the glories of the Lord and perform our devotional service. It's not that material life is most important and our spiritual life is secondary. If we have time, we hear. If we have time, we chant. If we have time, we go to the temple. No, these things are required, and therefore one has to plan accordingly in such a way that one has sufficient amount of time. Well, how do we know we have sufficient amount of time? When we're feeling satisfied in the process of devotional service. We are not feeling satisfied in the execution of a devotional service, then one has to think, what do I need to bring about that satisfaction? That may be qualitizing the process of hearing. Because it says, if you hear once the pure sound of the holy name, you can destroy all sinful activities that have accumulated for many, many, many lifetimes. In fact, from the beginning of our sojourn in the material world, the process of hearing is very, very powerful. Okay, so we'll stop there and see if there's any comments or questions.
Thank you, dear Guru Maharaj. Dear devotees, you are welcome to share your realizations, share your comments, or if you have any questions, please feel free. We would love to see you. If you can open up your videos and be here in person, that would be great. If you're unable for some reason to be here and ask your question, you're welcome to type it up and I will relay it to Maharaj. So far, I don't see any raised hands. So, Maharaj, just on this very last point, you said that we have to keep our spiritual life foremost, is what I understood. You said we have to prioritize things in such a way that our spiritual life is not taking a backseat because our material responsibilities are so heavy or so demanding. But how do we balance the things properly? Because we cannot afford to neglect our responsibilities in material life either. We have maybe family responsibilities, or maybe we are taking care of a sick parent or a child, or our
so we're always trying to adjust our spiritual life. Why don't we adjust our material life? We're adjusting the wrong thing. We're trying to fit in our spiritual life amongst our material life. Why don't we try to fit in our material life amongst our spiritual? What's more important? Are we this body or are we something else? If we are this body, then the material life is the most important. If we're something else, as is explained, Jiva Sarupai Krishna Nityada, that's who we are. And that's where we find our good fortune in our spiritual progress. So obviously, spiritual life is life. Material life is a shadow existence of existence. That's all. It's a shadow. Material life comes and goes. Spiritual life only grows. When we neglect our spiritual life, we're neglecting our real self.
So what's the end result of neglecting our real self and focusing on all the other material responsibilities?
What's the result?
Another body?
Obviously. Whatever you think of at the time of death will be what you make important during your whole life. You can't think of Krishna at the time of death if your whole life has been centered around trying to build your material empire. It's not possible. All right, basic duties. Therefore, that's what we say, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. These are for, Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita, regulate them. That's all. And the responsibilities that come. So there is, the material world demands so many things from us. And therefore, if we buy into all of those demands, we waste time. Keep life simple. If we're not simple in our material life, then it'll interfere with the process of our spiritual life. If you emphasize spiritual life, that'll grow. If you emphasize material life, that'll grow.
Right.
We're confused. If you try to balance, there's no question of balance. If you want to balance, just put Krishna first, and then Krishna will arrange everything you need to live in this material world. Krishna is there to make sure you get everything you need to live nicely. But if we think that I have to be the big plan maker and spend so much time in arranging everything, we just waste time. When Krishna is pleased, then everything is nice. Even your material life will be a result of pleasing Krishna. Our material life is about pleasing ourselves or pleasing someone who we feel is dear to us. So everything is there in devotional service. There is community, there's friendship, there is singing, there is eating, there is dancing, there is activity. So what do we do in the material world? We do the same thing. We do it with a desire to enjoy it and fortify our life in this world. If you do it in the spiritual realm, then automatically the benefits come, because ultimately that is who we are. We're spiritual beings. I'm not saying neglect your material life. I'm saying that, put Krishna first, and then everything else will follow. That's what it means to be Krishna conscious, to put Krishna first. Put our spiritual activities foremost.
So many of us are by ourselves, Maharaj, and so we don't have devotee association, just like Bharat Maharaj was all by himself. So it sometimes may be very difficult for us to remember to put Krishna first, because we are so caught up in the moment. Oh, this is the most pressing thing, I have to do it. Or that is the most pressing thing, I have to do that. How can we bring our minds back again and say, no, my spiritual life is most important. I have to put Krishna first.
Well, it comes by understanding. If you understand what is beneficial, you'll work in that one. Necessity, what is necessity and what is not necessity in the material realm? One should, reflect how to best to use one's time. For it starts with the morning is the best time. If you have good quality sadhana in the morning, hearing, chanting, worshiping, and even association, you're setting a nice foundation in your spiritual life for all of the activities which will come throughout the day. If you have some work, if you have these family responsibilities. If you don't put the foundation in, you try to build a house with a weak or no foundation, you don't get anything. It just crumbles. Or if it's weak, when a material wind blows, it blows it down. So we need to emphasize our morning program. That is the most important thing. And you might, well, am I going to bed too late? Therefore, I get up too late, and then the day is already started and my material responsibilities are facing me right away. Then go to bed earlier and use quality time to hear and chant.
Mm.
That's why the morning time is the opportune time, or the atmosphere, and that part of the day is conducive to spiritual practice. Where the atmosphere throughout the day is more towards activity. And the atmosphere at night is more to the mood of enjoyment. And that's how the day works according to the three modes of material nature. Therefore, one should keep good sadhana in the morning, perform activities during the day, and at night engage in kirtan or more spiritual activity to push back that enjoying mood. That's why Prabhupada used to say, every night in our temples around the world, we should be doing 3 hours of kirtan. That's in the Bhagavad, that's in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Because to push back the effects of the mode of ignorance, which is more prominent in the nighttime, kirtan is the way to keep our consciousness focused nicely. It's harder to control the mind in the evening because the tendency is the mode of ignorance is more prominent. That's a general principle. If we live in the temple, it's not like that. But if we live outside, that's the way the material energy works. So, yeah.
Mm.
And you can hear and chant throughout the day too. Not that it's relegated only to the morning, but the morning is the foundation for all of our practice in spiritual life and in executing our day-to-day life in this world.
Thank you, Maharaj. Dear Raj Prabhu, please go ahead, and then we will have Mr. Bhikkhu Parmar next.
Thank you so much. Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for that wonderful class. It was, Maharaj, I wanted to ask you, so you said that we need to have rapt attention in our hearing the message, for example, the message of the Bhagavatam from the qualified bona fide speaker. And we also need to have rapt attention as we're chanting the Maha Mantra. And you said that the qualification for getting the message is sincerity. And you said the method is organizing our life so that we can maximize the quality and quantity of our devotional service and every aspect of that in a balanced way. So if we're attempting to do all of these things to the best of our ability, but we're not getting the message, or we're not getting the progress that we want to get, how do we identify or pinpoint the things, the obstacles that are blocking us and stopping us from hearing with rapt attention, stopping us from getting quality devotion, performing quality devotional service?
Too much sense gratification, that's why. If we're engaged in, we have to organize our material life and take care. And that's why Krishna says, he makes the point in the Bhagavad Gita, one who eats too much, or eats too little, sleeps too much, or sleeps too little, cannot practice the yoga system. He said, well, therefore one should be regulated in eating, sleeping, working, and one more. You go to the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains that. So you have to practice to regulate your life in such a way as that these things are organized nicely. We're eating, sleeping, working, and recreation. Thank you, Prem Kishore. And then maybe Sri Devi can turn to Canto 1, Chapter 3, verse 44, which is the last verse in the chapter, and go towards the end of the purport. 1, 3, 44. Go all the way down the page. Okay, here, I'll go up a little bit more. Okay, right, stop right there. Don't move. Here, okay. Where is, let me hit. One should hear with rapt attention from the real person, and then one can realize the presence of Lord Krishna every page. The secret of knowing Bhagavatam is mentioned here. No one can give rapt attention who is not pure in mind. No one can be pure in mind who is not pure in action. No one can be pure in action who is not pure in eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating. But somehow or other, if one hears with rapt attention from the right person, the very beginning, one can assuredly see Lord Sri Krishna in person in the pages of the Bhagavatam. Prabhupada spells it out in detail. So it's sincerity is there, but this is the process here to achieve what is called rapt attention. Practice, one has to be pure in mind, pure in action, pure in the bodily activity. Otherwise, they interfere with our consciousness and our ability to hear properly. Pure means you're following the process as given.
Okay, thank you, Maharaj. It's helpful.
Thank you, Raj Prabhu. Mr. Bikku Parmar Prabhu, would you like to go ahead?
Come back to
Hare Krishna. Can you hear, Mara?
yes.
Hare Krishna, Pranam, and we feel fortunate always to hear you and to be in your association. I fully agree with what you said today about hearing, which is so important, and to get the mind focused when chanting, reading, or listening to somebody. As you rightly said, sometimes we are speaking to each other, but not listening to each other. And all I want to share today is, okay, we are in the kind of backseat in the retirement, so we have more time for spiritual development. But I'm a learner, and having come out of material living, which was more prominent after COVID, the lockdown made me realize what's important in life. So we're making adjustments, and I agree, utilize morning time more. I'm trying to readjust the lifestyle and make time for all the spiritual development. So it's a process I'm in, and trying to practice it and to put it into practice for going deeper into sadhana and into Krishna consciousness. So I just felt like sharing that, but your blessings are with us.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Prabhupada would always say, Krishna consciousness simply means to practice. Just apply your intelligence, apply your attention to the process, and the realizations will come. The material obstacles will start to drop away through the hearing process. Because you have to understand, when you're hearing transcendental knowledge, you're connected to the spiritual platform. But just like if there's a fire in the distance, you may be able to see the fire, but you may not be able to feel the warmth because of the distance. But as you get closer, the brightness of the light becomes more, and the heat starts to be felt. So as you absorb yourself in Krishna consciousness, you start to get knowledge, you start to feel free from the anxiety that comes by living in this material world, and you actually become happy. These are all time-tested results that come by way of the process of absorbing ourselves in Krishna consciousness. And absorbing ourselves starts with the hearing process, and it develops from the hearing process also. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhikkhu Parmar Prabhuji. We have Prem Kishori. Please go ahead, Prem Kishori.
Thank you. Thank you, Shridevi Mataji. Hi, Krishna. Guru Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. Goes to Prabhupada. Sorry, I'm not able to turn the camera on. Guru Maharaj, thank you for the wonderful class and much needed introspection on what the hearing is all about. I do have one doubt. So Rupa Goswami Prabhupada mentions in chapter 1 of Nectar of Devotion, which is characteristic of pure devotional service. One of the characteristic is Sudurlabha, like it's very rare to achieve pure devotional service. We were discussing that last night and correlating it with chanting the song sung by Lord Shiva, the Rudra Gita in 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 24, verse 55, where interestingly Lord Shiva also says the same thing. But Guru Maharaj, so Rupa Goswami Prabhupada is breaking down that what can not reach us to a pure devotional service. He says by any kind of by various kinds of penances and austerities, by endeavoring alone, or by becoming a very big philosopher who's able to analyze everything, is not an eligibility criteria for Krishna to give pure devotional service. He might give liberation, he might give material comfort, but not pure devotional service. So what is the criteria? Is the mercy of a pure devotee. So today after your class, I was thinking more about it, that Prabhupada, interestingly, I'm trying to connect. Bhagavad Gita chapter 7 verse 1 elaborates on like what happens in the heart of a conditioned living entity when we hear from a pure devotee. So, Guru Maharaj, so rapt hearing or hearing from the lips of a pure devotee, is it one of the ways of invoking that mercy of a pure devotee to earn an eligibility to perform pure devotional service? Is it one of the ways of mercy, invoking that mercy?
Yes, it's probably the prime way, because when the pure devotee sees that the devotee is sincere in the execution of their devotional service, he's more and more inclined to give his mercy to such persons in the form of the understanding that they need in order to practice devotional service. So that mercy, that mercy comes with the ability to cut away the obstacles that are blocking the progress of devotional service. That's what the spiritual master does. He cuts away your blocks when he sees the devotee is actually sincere. When you're not sincere, and then he gives you instructions how to cut away those blocks in the way you execute your own devotion. In other words, he's giving you some adjustment that was required in order for you to perform the service in such a way that you can overcome the obstacles. And then when you're actually fixed in the process of devotional service, then the mercy flows. And the mercy is just like there's that verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th canto, second chapter, verse number 41 or 42, I'm not sure which one, but it describes that satisfaction, realization, and connection with the Supreme Personality of Godhead all come by way of the process of devotional service. Just like when one eats, one gets satisfaction from the eating process, one gets nourishment of the body, and one becomes happy. So in the same way, devotional service brings about those results. And if one is sincerely absorbed, then the spiritual master will say, oh yeah, he will give his mercy. He will pray to Krishna for that person, to give them whatever they need to continue on their process of devotional service. He will make available the knowledge they need in order to continue their execution of devotional service. And if he's pleased, then Krishna is pleased.
Wow. So
So
all
Guru
this,
Maharaj, that is-
go
ahead,
ahead.
Prem.
Please go ahead, Sridevi Mataji. Sorry.
I was just trying to pull up that verse for everyone. Canto 11, chapter 3, verse 44. Is that correct, Maharaj?
No, there's no need to pull it up.
Okay.
So Guru Maharaj, all these things just by sincere hearing from a pure devotee.
Yeah, just like one of the experiences I have when I'm giving a class and there's an audience sitting in front of me. If someone is really listening, they attract my attention. I can see it right away. And someone who is not listening, my attention doesn't go to them so much, although I notice the fact that they're not listening so much. But if someone is really listening, then I'll even try to emphasize more of what I'm giving, so that person who's really listening will benefit more and more. So you attract the mercy by your sincerity.
Okay. Thank you, Guru Maharaj. That solves a lot of other questions that I had. Thank you. So that means that by hearing with rapt attention from a pure devotee, the noise of the mind is subdued and is replaced by the instructions of the spiritual master. And it gives the strength to go ahead and follow. Thank you.
Yeah, the sound vibration conquers the noise of the mind rather than the noise of the mind conquering the sound vibration.
Okay. I'm very grateful, Guru Maharaj. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very nice question. Thank you, Prem Kishori. Go ahead, Srimati, please.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances, Sylvester Prabhupada. Thank you for the nice class. I have a question, like you always say that act on your intelligence, use, but I feel like it's just like a practical question. It sounds funny, but I have this so long. So being a housewife, I feel that my brain has become very dull, and I'm not having that much intelligence to understand Srimad Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita or to apply in our daily life. And also, I see many housewives, they complain that being at home, just doing chores and taking care of kids and all, your intelligence is going down and your brain doesn't act anymore like sharply. So can you give any tips, Guru Maharaj, like all of us?
Yeah, just turn on the sound vibration. We got the electronic age here. We got so many means by which we turn on. We can listen to Prabhupada. We can listen to our spiritual master while we're cooking, while we're cleaning. And so yeah, I know one lady. She she had many challenging physical problems, really challenging. And so much so that her mind was in distress because of that. And so aside from doing the work she needed on the physical level, she arranged their house to have speakers in different rooms and 24/7 it was on. That's the benefit of those electronic age. We got all of these devices. We can connect with Srila Prabhupada at any time, with our spiritual master, with the holy name. We have so many kirtans. Yeah. Yeah. And it's not going to interfere with your work at home. In fact, it'll make it even more pleasant. And then you'll find people will talk to you less because they see you're absorbed in listening to that. And you'll find it's better. Yeah, turn it on. And I do that, when my habit is when I'm alone, I always turn on Prabhupada or a kirtan, something.
Yes, goodness, yeah. I try to do most of the time.
Sometimes I just continue to chant in my mind, but either way, I don't want to be separated from the sound vibration even 1 second, because automatically there's another sound vibration that's going to enter in, and that's what makes the mind dull.
Hmm. Yes, goodness, yeah.
Yep, that's why this process is not just hearing at a select time, it's hearing 24/7, hearing always.
Yes, goodness, yeah. Thank you so much. And I also like the point where you mentioned that why don't you adjust material life into spiritual life? That's very true, Gurmaj. Yeah, we have to think in that way. Always adjusting spiritual life. If we have time, we'll do spiritual activities. Otherwise, mostly focus on material things only. Yeah, it should be other way around. Yes. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, put the horse before the cart.
Yes.
Cart will follow. I have to quit at 9 o'clock on the hour, which is about 4 minutes from now. So
Yes, good.
So we have time for one last question from Raj Prabhu Maharaj.
yeah,
Go ahead, Raj Prabhu.
Thank you, Maharaj. Maharaj, you mentioned the importance of sincerity several times. So I wanted to ask, is there anything specifically we should be doing to try and increase our sincerity?
chat more, read more, associate more. The process is there. Prabhupada said it's simple. You just have to take it up. Huh?
Thank you, Maharaj.
You're driving in your car, to be listening to something, some transcendental sound vibration. You're walking along the street, you could be chanting. If you want to remember Krishna and you want to stay connected, Krishna will give you the intelligence how to do it. If your desire is in another area, you won't even think of the obvious. You won't be able to remember what you're supposed to do.
Thank you very much, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Jai Ho. Thank you, everyone. And tomorrow I won't be available. We're going to be.
Tomorrow it's Harrisburg, ISKCON Harrisburg class, Guru Maharaj.
Oh, yeah. Actually, I will be. That's at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time,
Yes.
right? Yeah. Okay. You can send me the verse on my.
Yes, Guru Maharaj. The verse number is Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, 16th chapter, verse number 7. 1.16.7.
Okay, got it. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. And Krishna.
Thank you so much, Guru Maharaj, for yet another wonderful class. Importance
Thank
of
you so much.
Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
very much.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Maharaj.
Krishna.
Thank you very much.